Let me know if this happens to you. You single guys, all right? You match with a girl or you meet some girl, you get her phone number, whatever. You open her up in text. Things start off pretty decent. And then it's like it just starts to get cold and it's out of nowhere. Like she just stops responding as quickly or just sort of ghosts or drops off. And then you got to try to reopen her in a couple of days. And then it's just short energy or short replies, low energy, and then she just sort of disappears eventually. And then that's it. Right? You guys never meet up, nothing ever happens. And you're sitting there going like, "Well, what the hell did I do wrong? Does she just not like me? Like what's wrong with me?" Right? Well, the reason you're going through that is because the dating market is broken. Okay. It's a broken dating market, particularly depending on what part of the world you're in. If you're in a major city in the United States, you're in the worst dating market in the world, the most hostile dating market probably in the world. All right. Assuming, I mean, taking away maybe some, maybe Middle Eastern countries with some crazy different crazy by our standards, of course, different customs and practices when it comes to dating. I mean, taking that out of the picture, looking at the first world, the cities like Miami, New York, Los Angeles, major cities in the United States are the most hostile for people trying to date right now. And that's men or women. Both men and women are feeling the same way, but then are also participating in the market and in such a way where it creates that hostile territory. So for you guys who are just sort of like normal and wanting to date and do the normal thing, right? Have girls in your life or whatever, this can be really really difficult. All right. And so what's going on? Well, okay, these girls have been dopamine fried by TikTok, Instagram, and 50 other guys a day in their DMs. And so she's bored and she's got high attention but low emotional attachment. So there's boredom, there's distraction, and it just seems like it's almost impossible to engage these girls over text sometimes, which I know the goal is a meetup, all right, and to get to a meeting, but if you can't engage her enough in text, you're not going to get to the meeting. So this leads to a lot of dead conversations guys are having. All right. And if you're a normal guy texting like a normal guy, you're going to lose. I mean, that's really that simple. All right. Now, it's not that women have changed so much. It's just the environment has changed. Okay. The environment has made it more difficult for women to feel like they can engage in the dating market. And so I could do a whole separate live stream on that. But what's important is here to understand that if you're doing the same thing that dating coaches were recommending that worked even a few years ago or 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's out of date. The same kinds of techniques are not going to work in the same way. All right. So you have to up your text game a bit. You have to be able to pull out of them that motivation. Again, they're distracted. They're what I call TikTok brained. Okay. They're just, their brains have been fried. Their dopamine centers have been fried through scrolling social media. And when she's texting you, especially on a dating app or something like that, it's another medium that she gets to put her attention into that fries her dopamine. It's like scrolling through your messages is no different for her and habit than scrolling through TikTok or scrolling through reels on Instagram. And so if it's not attention grabbing enough for her, if it doesn't stimulate some sort of curiosity or emotion, she just gets bored and scrolls to the next thing and there is no impact there. Well, and then the problem is if there's no impact due to her own behavior, right? It's like the impact isn't there because she has fried her brain. Okay. So these girls, pretty girls, fried their brains, and yet they'll think it's the guy that isn't, it's like the guy's fault, right? It's like, oh, not connecting with this guy or whatever. I don't know if I want to go on a date with them because we're not connecting with them. But meanwhile, she's boring herself over text. She's low energy, right? She's not offering very much, and then she blames the guy for not being able to engage her. So it is a problem, right? But what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it, right? You can either just have a shitty time in the dating market, right? Or you can solve the problem for yourself. And it's not that difficult to solve the problem. It just requires certain skill sets. So you have to develop certain skill sets when it comes to engaging with others and texting so that you sort of break through this barrier of boredom and TikTok brained, dopamine fried scrolling behavior, and you pull it out and make it and it inspire some sort of energy and emotion in her. Right. And that's what you got to be able to do that. And you got to be able to do that pretty much right away in the beginning while you're texting her. So it's just a strategy has changed. And it, normal texting that could get a guy some normal engagement just doesn't work anymore for really igniting that attraction and getting her on that date. So we have to do some other things to do that. And I'm going to cover what those are today. And I'm also going to cover 4 different archetypes that they're just sort of there that I see that are the absolute killers, right? Not killers in a good way, but like 4 different texting archetypes that are killing your chances, okay, of making it work with a girl. You guys are blowing a lot of chances over text by falling into one of these little categories. And so I'm going to cover that later in the video. All right. So things you're doing wrong, things that are not effective. It's just really what it's about. It's what's effective and what's not effective. So there's types, there's sort of some texting types girls are running into that are the same types of guys, and they're just not effective. It's not getting things to move along into a date, into sex, into all the good things, right? And so we can just avoid doing those things and do some of the right things. And it's just tweaking a little bit. It's all you have to do is you're just tweaking a little bit, and you're gonna do much better. All right. So hopefully this video will help you with that. I'm gonna get into a little bit of an example. We'll start with that, and the reason why I'm gonna use this example is this is a client. I extracted the text and put it in a document so that I don't accidentally dox somebody, right? I changed some of the wording around a little bit, so we don't want. I, my nightmare is that I do a field report example and then somebody recognizes the people from the example, even though I'm not that popular, and that will probably never happen. That's just something I don't want. So I did extracted the text exchange. We'll look at it. All right. The reason why I'm going to use this as an example, though, is because this isn't, believe it or not, I mean, we can always armchair quarterback, as they call it, right? Stand on the sidelines and criticize what somebody's doing. That's an easy thing to do. But if I'm looking at this objectively, for being objective and fair, he's not that bad of a texter. Like, this isn't this terrible, terrible thing. I've seen way worse. Okay. So, and that's why I picked this one, though. He's probably demonstrating average text skills that would normally pull things along if the girl was attracted and turn things into a date, maybe a few years ago. But now in our TikTok brained world we live in, it's not working as well. Right. And so there's some things to do a little bit differently, things that would have been maybe lame, and we could have been like, okay, that's a little lame, right, or whatever. But it wouldn't have been death sentence. Like, the girl would have just sort of helped him along, and they would have ended up on a date. So but those things aren't working, so we're gonna sort of view what's going on here and see what we can do to make it better. All right, so you guys will hopefully be able to see from these examples some things that you guys could change in your own text game. All right, so let's see, we'll share this little screen here. All right. So let's look at this little text exchange. All right. So they were talking before. I'm not sure exactly what led up to this, but he writes in a reply to her, right? So, back to being tied up in your office chair writing emails, LOL. Make anything fun with that olive oil from Traders, right? Or wherever they got the olive oil from. So they had a previous conversation that kind of led up to this. He's trying to move this along to a date. They've not been on a date yet. So her response, and this was after the weekend, like probably a Monday or Sunday night, right? Her response was, I did, but kept it simple because daylight savings threw me off. So I just made pasta with tomato sauce. And then she double text. So how the rest of your weekend go? All right. He replies, sounds delicious. I make pasta for dinner pretty often. And then next text, are you picky about your pasta? Like it has to be al dente. LOL. And then he responds again, my weekend was very exciting. Now, we're not going to get into the double texting thing because it was all in the same time frame. So it's not a double text. It's not like he texted and she didn't respond. And then, you know, 2 hours later, he texted again. It was all one conversation. So before the armchair advice people say, oh, he's double texting. That's not the problem here. All right. But I kind of had to cringe when I read this a bit because he's missing a lot of opportunities to really engage her over text. And it's kind of lending to this boring conversation. All right. And so let's look at why that is. All right. So what he's doing is he's doing a number of things wrong here. He's asking low investment questions. He's neutralizing tension and he's not really rewarding her investment. And he's doing this all because he's really trying to play it safe. Like he thought this sounds delicious thing was like a way of I don't know, covertly warming up a conversation maybe or like and so I'm not sexualizing completely, but making it a little bit warmer. But really, it comes across as um just not it's not really engaging. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's just not. It doesn't really ignite anything inside of her. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't really ignite. There's no there's no igniting of any sort of emotion or motivation or anything like that in this exchange. He has opportunity to do it. She's clearly interested in him, or she wouldn't be responding with a question and trying to get him engaged. But he's kind of this is sort of blowing it. And what it boils down to is it comes down to playing it safe, being afraid to push the envelope or push things a little bit. Do you know what I mean? In the conversation. So if you look at his like first response, right? Um, her message was, I kept it simple. Just made pasta with tomato sauce. All right. So this is a soft invitation to flirt or to tease her a little bit. Okay. She's basically giving him something to play with, whether she realizes it or not. But instead of capitalizing on it, he goes with delicious. I make pasta for dinner often. So it's rapport building because sure I do that too, right? But there's zero tension. All right. It reads like a polite small talk, and the sounds delicious was supposed to be something that he thinks up, but it doesn't really work too well in this context. All right. So what would be a more attractive response here? Well, you have to be okay with taking risk and pushing the envelope. And that's the main point of this sort of thing here is that you got to take risks. All right. So you have to be a risk taker when you're texting these girls now, or else it's just not going to work. Okay. You're not going to ignite anything, and she's going to be bored and she's going to scroll past your texts and not respond, which she ended up responding to him later. And I'll show you. But I mean, there was no, like, she didn't respond till a day or two later, a couple of days later. Right. So like she just got bored with it. So what are some other ways he could have engaged her? Well, he could have said something like, well, at least it's not ramen. Then I'd have to ask how long you were in jail for and when did you get out? All right. Something like that. Something teasing, something to play with her a little bit. All right. He could have responded with just pasta with sauce. Wow, you're barely surviving over there. So he could have teased her a little bit that way. He could have said something if you wanted to be complimentary or whatever, wanted to say I do that too, kind of a thing. He could have done it in this way. He could have said, nice. LOL, I do that. I do that a lot too. And now I know the bar is now set reasonably low. If I ever if I ever cook you dinner, a little wink at the end or something, right? So these are some different ways of making that a bit more interesting. Like, where playing with her and teasing her rather than being so agreeable. She's inviting for something to happen here, and he's not really making anything happen. So he could instead be a little bit more teasing, be a little bit more less agreeable, so to speak, and a little bit more teasing. Or if he is agreeable, then he can imply a togetherness sort of framework, like, well, now the bar set reasonably low if I ever cook you dinner, right? So it's like that's implying we're together in the future, right? And so there's a number of things he could have done with imagery and words just in a sentence, right? Like just a little bit. Um, and that would have been like a better, that would have been fine. The key difference is these are creating energy and creating tension or creating imagery. It's not just mutual agreement, you know what I mean? And this, if you're going to sexualize or warm something up, this is like, sounds delicious, was pretty safe. You know what I mean? There's nothing that is being added to that it needs to be. There's no risk that's being taken there. You know what I mean? So then he goes with his question. So next question. This is after a full conversation of, okay, like he asked the initial question, which was fine. The tied up in the chair was great, right? But then it's like, now we're going back into what I call level one questions. So here's how you want to think of your questions. Let me get off this sharing here for a second. Here's how you want to think of your questions, right? Is that your questions have levels and they have depth to them. So most people, when they're texting or even talking, and this is a problem even with a lot of couples and people in relationships, is that most of their conversations are what I call level one conversations or questions. Um, those of you who have been following me for a little bit, those of you who are in my community over at school, you guys know what level one is versus level two or level three, or at least you should. All right. So level one question is basic information, logistics, safe sort of, conversations. Even something like, oh, hey, how's it going? Fine. I'm good. Good. How about you? Right. That's still level one because it's a programmed response. You see, there's no depth to that. And so level one questions or comments or those involve zero depth. So something like, oh, what do you do for a living? You know, "Oh, I'm a firefighter. Okay. Or whatever. I'm a paramedic. Okay, that's level one right there. Now you can't do a conversation without some level one stuff in it. All right, but you want to be able to bridge the gap to different levels. Okay, so level two is anything inspiring emotion or anything inspiring motivation. Okay, imagery, right? Those are like level two comments or questions. You know what I mean? And so that's where you want to take he didn't take his next question when he's asked if the pasta was al dente. That's still level one. You know what I mean? It's not, and so it ends up being kind of boring. Do you know what I mean? And so, and he would have been better off saying, asking what her favorite meal was if she could have had a chef come in and make it for her or something like that. Like he would have been better off, but trying to inspire some sort of emotion, some sort of a motivation. And that's what level, so like level one might be, oh, what do you do for a living? I'm a paramedic. Oh, wow. Well, what inspired you to get into that? What inspired you to get into that is a level two question, because you're asking what inspired them, what, you're drawing out emotions, you're drawing out motivation. And then level three is a togetherness framework, so, if you say, nice, I do that a lot too, but now I know the bar's set reasonably low if I ever cook you dinner, that's a togetherness framework. That's a level three. It gets them to envision doing something with you in the future. So those are your levels. And if you're having a conversation and you're all in level one, that's pretty normal. And that's, a lot of guys get away with that and they get dates. But the problem is you're really not inspiring a lot of emotion. You're not triggering or sparking that energy, which is what's going to pull her out of her TikTok brain. You see? Now, besides the levels, you also look at things in terms of y- green, yellow, red type topics. So green would be something safe and to talk about that she could talk about with everybody. Yellow would be something that's a little bit controversial that you only talk about in front of some people. And then red would be something that is very controversial that you wouldn't talk about in front of most people. Do you know what I mean? And so you can breach into those yellow topics, those little bit racy, controversial things, especially of a sexual nature or things involving dating or past experiences or exes or future, standards or any of those things. So you can do that and play with that too. And then you also have your um your your public information, your private information, and like your secret information. So everybody has a public persona. Everybody has things that they're keeping private and that they're keeping secret. Everybody does. All right. So there's certain things about you that you could talk about freely in front of anybody, and it's not a big deal. And then there's certain things that you would only talk about with certain people. And then there's certain things that are absolute secrets that you won't talk about with anybody minus the select few people in your life because they're very personal or they're very embarrassing or what have you, right? Now, if you can get into secret stuff with somebody, that's pretty good, but that I wouldn't expect that just over text before a first meeting. But if you can get into more private things, that's very doable and very reasonable. If you can get her to have a conversation with you that she doesn't normally have with everybody else, that isn't on the safe side necessarily, you've now built already a ton of rapport, a ton of trust, and you set the foundations for attraction. Okay, so these are all things that you want to be able to play with and do. And these potential responses that I gave that's a better way of doing that. It's a better way of opening those doors. All right. So now let's look at his question. So his question was, are you picky about your pasta? Like, does it have to be al dente? All right. So this is the bigger problem out of the text. All right. So the other thing was there were better responses he could have done versus the, sounds delicious, or I do that too, or whatever, right? There were better responses he could have done, but then he pivots into more pasta, right? And this is a mistake I see a lot of guys doing is they're getting responses because of a particular topic. So, if a guy is talking about pasta in this case, she's responding to him because she's interested in him. All right. That's why she's responding. It's not about the fucking pasta, right? It's not like she's such a pasta enthusiast that this is what the conversation's about. She's responding to him because she likes him and she's trying to find ways of sort of connecting with him. And you guys got to remember, as awkward as you feel, these women are way more awkward, right? They feel more awkward. Women are more when they're texting a dude, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't. All right. They're hoping you're going to lead it in the right direction. And especially like these Zoomer chicks, right? And especially women in 2026 and younger girls in their 20s nowadays, they don't have social skills. So you got to remember that you're dealing with somebody who's TikTok brained with no social skills. Doesn't make her a bad girl. In fact, she could be a great girl. But this is just the way she grew up. This is the way she's been conditioned. So she doesn't know what to say to you. She has no idea. So the same with this girl. She has no idea what to say to him, right? But the guy is thinking, like, whether he's thinking it consciously or subconsciously, he's talking about pasta and that's working. So then his tendency is to keep the conversation about pasta for as long as possible because that's what's working. Well, the problem with that is it becomes boring. So he would have been better off pivoting to something else completely at this point. You know what I mean? You got to be not afraid to pivot to different topics and different things. Don't stay to one thing because it's working and because it feels safe. And it goes back to taking risk. You know what I mean? Um, and that's another thing. A lot of guys, well, I'll get into that with the archetypes, the risk taking thing and how guys are afraid to do that. But we'll keep going. So the question he had asked, well, it was still along the lines of pasta and it was still level one. So it was boring, right? So it is a very low emotion. There was no flirting, there was no intrigue, there really wasn't much personality there. It was oddly specific about al dente. So it reads and it sounds slightly awkward, right? Now there's a million ways to follow up, but what it should have been was more of a banter. All right. So let me give an example of like what could have happened. For example, all right. So let's say she says she made pasta, right? He could have said, like, my one potential response, well, at least it wasn't ramen, in which case I'd have to ask how much time you did and how long you've been out, parenthesis, prison, with a little wink and like maybe a laugh emoji or something, right? And then she responds like, oh, hey, I like a good ramen or whatever, LOL. So that could have been a potential response, right? Because she's enjoying the playfulness. Then he could say something like, so what you're saying is that you are used to handcuffs, and then puts a little think face, write this down, and little asterisks, I'm writing this down, right? And then she might reply with, actually, I've never been in handcuffs, LOL. And then he could say something like, well, you move fast, but I'm adventurous. We should probably meet for drinks first, get to know each other, talk about safe words, basic first date stuff, a little laugh face. All right. So end scene. So that could have been a potential conversation. I've had millions of conversations like this. So have my clients. It's that playfulness that leads to more and more sort of playfulness, imagery. There's more emotion and energy happening. All right. There's more of a push pull, more of a banter. And that's what that teasing and playful escalation does. He had an opportunity to do that, but he played it safe. And that's the mistake here. All right. And then he also ignored another opportunity, which, okay, she had asked, well, how the rest of your weekend go? So now this is an invitation to build attraction through DHVs and through micro stories. All right. So not every conversation is you asking questions, because that would be an interview and that's boring. All right. Especially if they're level one questions that play it safe and only talk about things that she would be safe to talk about, right? Not getting into anything that personal, not getting into anything that spikes emotions, and just asking a series of questions. It's not a good way to have a conversation. All right. So like when she says, how did your weekend go? It gives you an opportunity to demonstrate your value without bragging about yourself or being a tryhard through a micro story. All right. So a micro story or a micro narrative. All right. And when I say micro, I mean, it's not this long text or something. It's like one or two sentences, but what it demonstrates is that you have some value, that you're doing cool things. And it also, it makes the person have more questions than answers by the end of your micro story. And that's the key. Most of you guys are telling your little stories or giving your answers in such a way where you're trying to clear things up, or you're trying to illustrate things in a logical format, instead of thinking about, well, how can I build curiosity? So the prerequisite, if you watched my other material, to attraction is curiosity. A girl's not going to respond to you. A girl's not going to stop and talk to you. A girl's not going to reply back to you unless there's some level of curiosity in the beginning. Curiosity leads to investment. So she becomes more invested in the conversation she's having and in the relationship that you're building. When, even if it's just, I don't mean a relationship, you know what I mean? But the exchanges that you're having, she becomes invested and she's curious. And then she gets in that fantasy part of her brain of like, I wonder what this guy's about. I wonder what it would be like to go out with him. I wonder what it would be like to date him. Right. I wonder what it'd be like to have sex with them. That sort of thing. Like she gets into that fantasy part, which is where all seduction happens, which is in the imagination fantasy part of the brain. And that's when she's a hell yes. And she's going on dates and she's taking next steps and ending up in the bedroom with you. Right. So you need to follow that format. Well, if you're not doing things to build curiosity or to create investment, you never get to the fantasy portion. You never get to the bedroom. It just never happens. All right. And so like, how can you do that? Well, again, when someone says, how was your weekend? He replied, well, my weekend was very exciting. This This is vague. I mean, it's positive, which is nice, but it's vague. Um, it's very anticlimactic. You know what I mean? So it doesn't, I mean, it could create like, okay, why was it exciting? I guess in a way it could create some curiosity that way, but women want a mysterious story, like a small story, not just like a wall that they have to break through. Because remember, she's socially awkward. You have to assume the girl is socially awkward and doesn't know how to text. So she's not going to necessarily know how to ask about your weekend to draw more out of it, draw more information out of you. You know what I mean? And so especially if she doesn't know you and she's not that invested in you yet, right? So what you want to do is like a mini story. So for example, he could have replied with, "Hey, pretty good actually. I went for my normal Saturday long run, grabbed dinner with a friend, and then accidentally got pulled into a trivia night at someone's house. It was terrible, but it was fun. Or we were terrible at it, but it was fun." So something like that. And I purposely picked something that wasn't crazy. Like it doesn't have to be like your demonstrations of value. It doesn't have to be like crazy, like, went on a trip, spent tons of money, flew in a private jet. Like that's not how it has to be. All right. It's cool if you can be that guy, but 99% of you guys are not that guy. Right. And even if you are that guy, maybe that's a little bit too try hard to go there anyway. Right. But to be just like a normal weekend. All right. So, or a normal Saturday. Hey, pretty good. I went for my normal Saturday long run. So what does that do? It illustrates that you're doing a long run on Saturday. Well, how long is the run? How often do you run? Are you a runner? Are you really into fitness? Do you hit the gym too? Or do you compete? You see, like this invites more questions. I'm doing my normal Saturday long run with no context, invites a ton of questions about fitness and running and all that stuff, right? Grab dinner with a friend. Well, that friend could have been a girl or a guy, right? So now she has to wonder, oh shit, does the other girls want this guy? Who's he grabbing dinner with? Right? It also adds a little social proof that you go out, you do things. You know what I mean? Then you accidentally got pulled. How do you accidentally get pulled into a trivia night? How does that happen? That's a lot of questions now, but it demonstrates value because now you're doing things with people, right? You have personal connections. So like a simple reply like that leads to all these other little questions and sparks curiosity, particularly who is this friend you're grabbing dinner with? You know what I mean? That's a particular thing, right? So she can now respond to multiple things. She has a lot of places to go. You see, you have to help her because she's socially awkward and doesn't know how to talk over text. So you have to give her things to be able to respond off of. And if you're not giving her anything, she's going to get bored and weird and then she's going to stop texting. Okay? And so yeah, that's an example. These are just some examples of what, could be done here, right? And so like core problems, it's the text is not it misses a lot of opportunities. All right? And so attraction comes from like playfulness and personality and emotional leading and tone. And that's is what this exchange sort of fails to do. Okay. And so, but I want to show you, despite that, go back to my share screen. Despite all that, and by the way, I'll answer you guys' questions when I take a look at the chat here in a minute. Despite all that, we go to the next thing. She did respond to his reopen. So this is what I wanted to show you. Like, she's not unattracted to him. He didn't blow it, but it's just not moving along like it should. She's actually attracted to this guy. She's more attracted to him than I think he realizes or wants to accept. And that's an inner game problem. All right. Because really, after this previous exchange here, where she just sort of ghosted the conversation, it was kind of boring. She wasn't attracted to the guy, or she was very low attraction. That would have been a deal breaker. She would have just been like, and then she would have moved on to something else. Right. So when he reopens her, his reopener was terrible, by the way. Hey, must be a busy week for you. Don't tell me you've been literally only having pasta for dinner. This is what I mean. Like he's still on pasta. Like get off the fucking pasta, man. You know? But again, it's like I'm playing it safe. I'm sticking to the thing that seemed to be working. What he doesn't realize is what's working is the fact that she's attracted to him. And that's the only thing that's working. His text game isn't killing him, but is not helping. You know what I mean? So pasta, especially, is not helping him. It's not the pasta she's interested in. It's the guy. It's you, dude. She's interested in you. All right. So pivot to something else. Okay. It'll be fine. It'll be okay. She'll still like you. Probably more so because she's having to fight through these conversations about pasta instead to respond to you, right? But she does respond, haha, nah, I didn't meal prep enough. Why is this week so much? I've been so tired, but hopefully your week's been going well. And so she does respond. Now, this is not helping him move things towards a date, though. That's the problem, right? Because he's not sparking that interest with that emotional spark, with that playfulness. She's not creating enough investment here, but she still likes him. So she's responding to him. You see what I mean? And so this could end up on a date someday, or it could end up dead in the water. It's going to depend on how these conversations go. Like, look, when a girl is texting you, she's maybe she doesn't realize it, but she's covertly trying to figure out how you're going to be in person. Like women are naturally risk averse. And so she's trying to play it safe and figure out how's this guy going to be when I get him, when he's in front of me. And if she's not feeling any spark or any emotion at all during the text process, to her meeting up with you now is a big risk because this could be uncomfortable. This could be boring. Girls would go into a direction of maybe he's a crazy guy, maybe he's, a violent guy or something like that. They'll even go in that direction when there's an unknown factor here. She doesn't have any trust if she's not having those emotions spiked. So it makes it harder for her to say yes to a first date when there is no energy in these texts, because the texting again is her trying to determine or figure out how is this guy going to be in person. And if it's kind of a dry, low risk conversation where there's not these spikes in emotions and the banter going on, it's she's less likely to say yes now to meeting up. She'll put it off. She's already like, this girl is already kind of preemptively putting off a meetup right now by saying, oh, such a tiring week and so busy. That's already preempting maybe now is not a good time to meet up. She's only doing that because she's attracted to the guy, but she's just not sure yet, And so you make her sure by having more emotional spikes and banter, building more curiosity investment. And you do that by not playing it safe. That's the only way to do it, right? You have to not play it safe and be prepared to take risks. Okay, so some little texting principles that this guy would need that you probably need too. Again, don't play it safe. Don't stick to level 1 questions, all right? A series of level 1 questions sounds like a survey or sounds like a boring logistical conversation. It doesn't really do anything for her. All right, so you got to pull yourself out of that. You got to reward her when she asks a question. You have to reward it with energy, all right? She asks about the weekend. Don't give her a 1-sentence answer necessarily, or a 3 or 4 word answer that has no energy to it. Give her some energy, all right? Give her something to vibe off of. Give her a little micro story for her to be able to respond to that. Give her multiple ways of responding, because your micro story involves bits and pieces that have a lot of questions. That's going to be a curiosity inspiring statement. All right. So you have to inspire curiosity. Use that when she asks a question, use that opportunity to do that. Okay. Teasing more instead of just being so agreeable all the fucking time. All right. Instead of sounds delicious, tomato sauce only, that sounds suspicious. right? Teasing creates a little bit of attraction, and it says that you're courageous. It says that you're not afraid of her. All right, so you're not afraid to take risks. So do that a little bit more. All right. Um, Now, some things that he did do right was, I mean, he didn't inappropriately double text. He didn't over pursue. He didn't send like long paragraphs. I mean, there's a lot of things he did right. Like I said, this was not a bad exchange. The structure of it is fine. The issue was the tone, though. The tone and building, sparking that emotion was what was missing. Okay. And so now I'll kind of take a peek at some of your guys' questions here. Um, yeah, but so do you, right? Like, so do you. So most of you guys are, hey, John, what's up, man? All right. All right. So, serious question. Serious question. With the amount of success with women, don't you get unmotivated by sex? If not, what keeps you going? No, yeah. So that's the depth of the relationship, man. Like, there's different tiers here. Most guys are just trying to get their wieners touched. Like, that's where they're at. They're at, what do I need to do to get a girl to touch my wiener consistently? You know, that's where that's where most guys are at, the very lowest level. All right. But there are higher levels than that. You got to be, and having a more in-depth relationship with somebody and a more in-depth sexual experiences is what the motivator is. You know what I mean? So having that more in-depth connection with somebody, which is why most guys, even pickup guys, end up in some form of a relationship or a commitment. We end up in commitments because it's a higher level of a relationship. It's more in depth. It's not just getting laid. You know what I mean? And so once you can get laid, the motivation isn't to get laid anymore. The motivation is to develop deeper relationships. And really, that's what's more important anyway. And I think that's where the focus should be. It's just that the problem is if you don't know enough seduction skills to get laid at all, right? Well, then how do you develop deeper relationships? You can't get there. If you can't make a girl at least want to have sex with you, right, for in the short term, then it's not going to develop into something good for the long term. So you have to learn these initial skills to get to the other thing, but it's really the more important thing is the other thing. The more important thing is the depth of your relationships. Do you know what I mean? And that's the motivation. um what do we got here? I uploaded a convo I had on Hinge recently to the school. Some post red pill gurus would say I don't drink coffee, so the ghost that chick. Yeah. I'm trying to understand what you're saying here because it's kind of a broken. But yeah, um, I uploaded convo I had in Hinge recently to the school post. I don't know if I saw that actually. I had a busy weekend and have not been feeling well lately, so I'm a little bit out of it. Yeah, some guys yeah. Well, all right, so a lot of red pill gurus, man, they don't know what they're doing with women. I mean, that's just the way it is, right? And so like they miss these opportunities, they miss these nuanced things. I mean, that's just what's going on there. All right. I got to pivot here to um let's look at find my notes here. Let's look at these archetypes. All right. So I gave a little example for you guys to go through, some things to improve on. But let's look at some simple things. Okay. It's very easy to do this, but let's talk about types of texters and let's see. Obviously, these are very broad categories. So you guys might be a mix of one or two of these. It might not be all of one, or might not completely fit the category. It's just sort of a way to sort of see these different texting strategies and basically so you can not make as many mistakes, right? So let's look at different texting types, some of the common ones that are really fucking dudes' games up, right? Like their game is hurting because they do these behaviors. All right, so the one type is probably the most common that I see, which is the interviewer. Okay, the guy who this is sort of the default male texting style. After they do some research on how to text a girl, usually they know that they need to ask questions, right? Like that's like a guy's like, okay, I got to ask her questions. I can't just talk about myself. I know that much. And so then they're like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask her questions. And then the style ends up being very boring because they're all level one surface level questions. They don't inspire any emotion. There's no teasing, there's no banter, there's no micro stories, nothing, right? So here's an example. Back to she says, "Oh, I made pasta tonight," or whatever. Nice. Do you cook often? She might be like, "Sometimes," and then he's like, "Whoa, what kind of food do you like?" And she's like, "Italian mostly." And he's like, "Oh, do you like al dente or more of a soft noodle?" All right. Anyways, you get where I'm going with this, and this is kind of the last real world example what he was guilty of, which is kind of making it feel a little bit more like a survey because you're sticking to one topic. You're afraid to pivot to something else, and it's all level one, it's all surface level. It's not inspiring, it's not motivational, it's not emotional, right? And so it's just sort of a playing it safe way of texting. And that's really what this is. It's a guy who knows he's supposed to ask questions, but he's too afraid to take risk. So he plays it safe. And women will describe these men as being nice, but also as being boring. And she might be like, "Oh, she's a good guy, but I'm just not into him," because there's no emotional spike, but he's not unpleasant. You know what I mean? And he's showing interest. So she's like, "Well, I know that he seems like a good guy, but I'm just not interested in him. I don't know why," right? They don't know why they're not interested because there's no emotional spikes. There's no curiosity. There's no investment. There's nothing for her to grab onto, right? And this is a lot of guys are guilty of this very common problem. All right, so there's no emotional movement. The texting goes question, answer, question, answer, question, and what's worse is the questions again. They're these level one green public questions. So there's no risk that's being taken at all, which means there's no spark, no depth, no curiosity, and no investment. Okay, so whatever attraction she had in the beginning will tend to dry up with this style. So remember, the formula is curiosity building, investment, and then get her into fantasy and imagination. You have to move things along in that way. This style doesn't move things along. It kind of kills curiosity and ruins investment. All right. The only thing she can imagine with these conversations is a boring date, and that's not good. And this is why girls will tend to just drop off with this texting style with a guy who doesn't take any risk. All right. So guys do this because they don't know how to drive conversations without being the interviewer. They don't know what else to do. They don't know how to use those little micro stories to give her something to play off of. They don't know how to tease and be playful. And so they end up just into these, and they don't know how to ask a question that is more emotions inspiring. That's also a little bit more of a risk to ask. And so they end up playing it safe and it kills them. So that's the most common type. So here's a type number two, which is the over investor. So this is the guy who's the he qualifies to the girl. He tries too hard to impress or please. So an example of this guy might go, she says, let's say I made pasta tonight. He says, "Wow, that sounds awesome. You must be an amazing cook." And or "I love pasta. I make pasta and sauce myself all the time." It's like it's okay to compliment or agree with something like like that if it's true, but the problem is was when the guy will reward her heavily but for small things. And that's how you know he's qualified. Like, "Wow, you're so amazing." You know what I mean? It's like he's just rewarding her and he's just he's just complimenting her or whatever. Yeah, you know what I mean? I can't even think of the words for it, but he's just like, he's just building her up, but it's like over nothing. And so, and then he fails to pivot usually after a compliment, or he just sticks to that sort of reward, in agreements and being very agreeable. And it's especially problematic when it's not even true. Like, oh, you must be a great cook, for example. If a guy said that, you know, is that really warranted from a girl who just boils noodles and throws sauce from a jar on top of it? You know what I mean? Like, that's not really a warranted, you must be a great cook, unless you're being sarcastic. That's not really a real compliment, and you see that all the time. Guys making disingenuous compliments because they're just trying to qualify to the girl. And what it signals is low standards, it signals approval seeking and trying to win her over. And women's figure this stuff out immediately. Like, even the socially awkward ones, they can see it a mile away. And then her hypergamy will kick in, and she will question whether or not she's mating down rather than up if she were to go with this guy, and her attraction will drop. So qualifying to a woman too hard, I mean, it's going to result in disinterest and ghosting, usually to distrust and low attraction. All right. She'll like the compliments and sometimes keep a guy around in her DMs and text the guy, but she will never end up meeting up with them. You know what I mean? It's like she likes to get fluffed up every now and then, but she's not going to be attracted to that guy. So you don't want to be that dude, right? That destroys the game. All right, for you. Um, yeah. But yeah, what? Here's another thing too I wanted to mention because I had it in my notes here. Many guys who are actually decent in their text game experience this exact thing, the over investing, as soon as the prettier girl arrives. So when a dude is like used to dating, let's say sevens, right? Just for sake of conversation, he's used to dating sevens, and then a nine shows up. All right. So then he gets nervous and he qualifies to her. And then as soon as he does that, she puts the guy in the no fuck zone, and he never gets out of it. All right. So, like, that happens all the time. So you guys, you got to be aware that certain circumstances you could be guilty of this. You know what I mean? You could have great text game with certain girls you're mid-level attracted to, and then the really attractive girl comes along that really presses all your buttons. All of a sudden you fall into one of these strategies and you blow it for yourself. That happens all the time, right? Because a guy sees more of a threat to losing that girl, and he gets in his head and he screws it up. So just be aware of that. All right, third type is the dry texter. So this guy is emotionally flat. Um, the dry texting guy, you see a lot of red pill guys do this thing. It's because they're socially retarded. All right, that's why. He's nervous, and he's afraid to fuck it up, and he wants to look like some sort of alpha male. You know what I mean? And so he learns just to say less. So he's like, if I just don't say as much, I won't ruin it. Like, that's his mindset. And then I think of I appear more stoic and alpha, super red pill or whatever, right? So that guy might sound like this. Like, she might say, I made pasta tonight, and he might be like, nice, as a reply. Just tomato sauce though. That was her response. He might go, okay. She's like, how was your weekend? He's like, good. I mean, that's an extreme example, but you get the idea. There's no emotional spark. There's no questions. There's no curiosity building, nothing. I'm just going to be super stoic, Mr. Alpha male. I'm going to be the quiet type, and then girls will really love it. Right. Well, no, not really. You just sound like a retard. So, and you sound very dull and uninteresting. But again, guys are doing this because they're trying to sound tough, or they're playing it safe, or both, and it's just not attractive. You got to learn text skills. All right. Now the fourth archetype that screws guys up, and this is hilarious because this has been new over the last few years. The normal guy who's internet brained, right, learned about negging. So negging was, something that was reserved only for the pickup community for a long time. And now everybody knows about negging. Like, negging is common vernacular to normal people, right? Like, so like most girls, most guys, they know what negging is. And so now you have all these guys on the internet who are socially awkward, who they think they know that they're not supposed to qualify to a girl. And so they think that what will make them be cool and sound cool to a girl is if they nag them. And so then it's almost like they're trying not to get on a date. It's almost like they're trying not to get picked up. You know what I mean? It's like they get sort of satisfaction of like, well, I really showed that girl or whatever, like I really stuck it to that one, even though, I'll never get dates this way, but but I'm really letting these girls know that they're 304s, like it's like this weird thing that guys are doing now. And it's very common. It's like you're not special. So many guys do this. More guys do this, I think, than text normally. All right. And so this is the archetype. I call him the dickhead. All right. So that conversation might go like this. She says, I made pasta. And he replies, so did my 5-year-old niece. And she might be like, okay, rude. And he might be like, I'm just saying women need to learn to cook unless you're like a 10. Right. Like, I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's like, you're probably not going to get the date that way. You know what I mean? And it's again, it's a trend from dudes who can't get girls, right? So they think that if they excessively neg a girl, act like an asshole, that they'll end up getting her. I mean, you might occasionally pull a low self-esteem 6 this way, but like you're not going to get high quality women this way, for sure. And there's a way to neg in a way that's appropriate, in a way that works. That's not the topic of this video, but excessively negging and being a jackass, it just isn't going to help you. It's very uncalibrated. You know what I mean? And you may feel some sense of satisfaction because you feel like somehow you're not getting rejected in a way. You feel like you're really telling her, you're really being a dickhead to her. So she rejects you. It's not a big deal. It's almost like you pre-rejected her, but I don't know. It's whatever psychological shit you got going on there. It's not helping you. It's actually causing you to not get dates. All right. And so if you're going to learn how to neg, get in my community over at school. It's free. Ask about negging. There's a way to do it properly. There's a way to be playful and not be a dickhead. All right. This negging thing is way too popular now, so it's not unique. It's not working the way you think it's going to work. All right. So now the attractive text style that you want to take on is the playful leader. Okay. This is the guy who teases, tells small stories, moves the emotional tone, and opens her up, breaches into those other levels of topics, gets her to talk about parts of her private life, gets her to have conversations that she doesn't normally have. That's what you want to think about. Can you get her to have a conversation that is not the conversation she's having with every other guy on the internet? Because if you can, now you've broken her out of her TikTok dopamine induced brain. Right? If it's the same conversation she's having with everybody else or any guys she talks to, if she's in the same conversation loops, those same loops that used to get you dates, by the way, ends up not getting you dates. She ends up scrolling past them and treating it like it's the next reel. But if you can break through and have a unique conversation that she's not having with anybody else, now all of a sudden, the conversation, the exchange you're having becomes special. Now there's a uniqueness, a specialness to it, and she's not treating you like you're another TikTok or reel to scroll through. That's the thing. Okay. Example conversation of something that would be a little bit more calibrated. Okay. She says, oh, I made pasta tonight. You're like, tomato sauce only. Do you live in a bomb shelter? Right. With a little wink. LOL, it was simple, but good was her response. He might say, simple pasta can be elite if done right. I'll allow it. And then when she asks about his weekend, pretty good, actually. I went for a run and somehow got dragged into a trivia night on a friend's boat. And the nerdy couple won, obviously. All right. So again, little micro story now. All right. Being on a friend's boat, like that's pretty interesting. You see what I mean? So that would be an example where the guy is playful, is relaxed. He's not approval seeking, and he's leading that conversation and he's sparking energy. That's what women interpret as the alpha guy, not the guy who can't talk and hold a conversation over text, not the one word texter guy. Okay. All right. Being alpha doesn't mean just being able to beat ass. It's social dominance. And being socially dominant means being able to carry a conversation and carry the tone of the conversation and having social intelligence and confidence and demonstrating that you're higher status and you have mate value because of the way you can drive a conversation. Okay. So, looking at all these different types, maybe review the video later. And I got a post on the different types on school. Look at what types you've fallen into and you've been guilty of. Have you been the interviewer who's been playing it safe? Have you been the one word texter guy? Or have you been over invested when the girl ends up being hot, right? Like what mistakes have you made? What combinations? And look at those and then figure out how to change those patterns. Right. And so I've given you a lot here in this video to help you change patterns. What it really boils down to is not playing it safe and being able to pivot or oscillate from different things, different topics, different techniques. Like if you've just asked and had a bunch of level 1 questions and answers, maybe doing some playful teasing or flirting next instead of doing that. Maybe when she asks a question, you get into a micro story that inspires questions in her brain. Maybe you get into more of a in-depth question, like a level 2 type of a question that inspires emotion. See, it's being able to pivot from all these things, and that's what's going to spark that energy and that emotion. And that's what's a requirement nowadays. You're not going to make it through. You're not going to get these girls on dates anymore just by having dry or normal conversations or being caught in the same conversation loop that everyone else gets caught up in. You have to be able to pull it from there into some banter with curiosity and investment. If you're not able to do that, you're really going to be hurting yourself as far as being able to get dates to happen. All right. Especially now. So there's bad news and good news. And I'll kind of close with this. The good news is this is actually very easy to do. Look, girls are biologically the same. They haven't evolved into a different creature yet. Maybe a couple 100 years that'll be different. But as of now, even with AI and even with the internet and being internet brained, we haven't evolved into different creatures yet. So women are still human beings with responses the way human beings are meant to respond to attraction signals and to seduction. So she's the same girl that she always was, and they always were generations ago, responding to attraction signals. That's the good news. The bad news or the hard thing is that the environment has changed and it's made it difficult to spark those signals for her. But if you learn how to spark those signals, if you learn how to pull out that energy, that motivation, that emotion, right? And those good feelings, here's the good news. Like she's probably been starved of having that for years, even if she's been in sexual relationships, even if she's been dating, right? These girls are alone. They're lonely. They don't connect with others. They don't know how. Guys don't know how to lead. Many girls today who are pretty actually go through long periods of not having sexual relationships because they don't know how to connect with others. I mean, this is what's going on now. We have a sexlessness in our society because people don't know how to connect with each other. We still have a subset and a cohort of women who are hypersexual and who rack their notches up. And many of these girls who go through these sexless periods have other periods of time where they've racked their notches up. And all that stuff is all been very damaging to their brains and been very unhealthy. But the point of it is that, they're still wanting to have that passion that's inside of them ignited. They still want to have those feelings ignited. They just don't know how. And they have a lot of barriers that they put up for themselves into having that. Well, the good news is though, is if you're the guy who can figure out how to break through all those walls and ignite those passions, like you can pretty much get whatever you want. There's no barrier now to where you can go because these girls are starving for it. So your dating experience is going to go very well if you know how to ignite these passions in a girl. If you don't though, then you're going to run into a lot of obstacles and dating is going to be very hard for you. So you have to decide which one's it going to be. Do you want it to be very hard for you, or do you want to be the guy that's able to ignite and pull these, these conversations out of women and make them feel that spark that they're biologically designed to feel? Which guy do you want to be, And so hopefully you want to be the guy that, that can inspire these conversations and that you're willing to work on it. And if you want to work on it more, just jump into my community. It's free and start asking questions. All right. Catch you guys in the next one.